So today we're going to be talking about Chinese languages, comparison, and acquisition tactics. Okay, so like I just mentioned, I'm the founder of Glossica, or Hawaiian. You can also download free content at our website here. We've also included some materials in your packages for this event, where you also get a QR code. So you can use that to also access some content. I'm a long-term resident of Taiwan, and we are live broadcasting directly from our office in Taiwan. So welcome again, and we're going to get started. I'll describe a little bit about Taiwan. Taiwan is what we can call as a kind of a crossroads of many languages. And it's a particular area of interest because you have a lot of overlapping languages and even overlapping language families spoken in the same place. And so it's a very interesting phenomenon how languages work in this place. And so I've spent most of my life working with these languages. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this map on its side like this so I can kind of describe what all of the languages are. Okay, so the whole country here speaks Mandarin Chinese. Taipei, the capital, is here in the north. And then this red area here is actually the language Southern Min, otherwise known as Taiwanese, popularly known as Taiwanese. This yellow area right here is Hakka. So Taiwan is mainly completely Mandarin speaking, and then you have 70% of the people who also speak Southern Min, and a small percentage of people who speak Hakka, and 2% of the population, although they are losing their language, their ability to speak the languages, is this other area of Austronesian languages. So I'll introduce each one of them in turn. Here you have Shaishiat, Atayal, Sinitic, Truku, Pazeh, Thao. Bunun is in the central area here. So, Kanakanavu, Sla'alua, Rukai. Rukai consists of several different dialects like Opanaho, Takonganabana. And then down extinct language Siraya, but there's a group of people trying to revive the language right now. Taiwan's name actually comes from this language. Dao means person, and An means location. So Dao An eventually gets borrowed into Chinese as Taiwan. So this means the people, a place of people. And down here you have Taiwan language, Taiwan with a P, not a T. The rest of the Austronesian languages are believed to kind of branch out from some point in history there. Mayan language, Amis, Kataran, Kabalan, Sakizaya right here, and Tao is spoken on the outer island here. And this Tao language is actually part of the Philippine language group, or the Ilonggo group. So it's actually more divergent than all the other languages. Okay, so that's Taiwan. Here are some caricatures of some of the different tribes. You can see that they have different clothing styles, headdresses as well. And so this is just a cute caricature of the Thao tribe, of the Bunun tribe, and the Rukai tribe. I want to tell you a little bit about my personal story before we go on. Okay, so actually I've spent the last few years studying and learning many of these languages. And so the Thao language is actually a moribund language, and it's on the verge of extinction. So I've spent most of my effort learning Thao and learning it to fluency. We've lost another handful of native speakers in the last couple years. And my own teacher passed away in February, and his wife just passed away a few days ago. And so and they were already in their 90s, but they were the last couple actually who are still using the language between each other. So this language, Thao, T-H-A-W, some older, I think, on Wikipedia, I think they still use an older spelling was T-H-A-O. But this language is pretty much on the verge of extinction. So I and maybe 2 or 3 other individuals who are not Thao are the only ones who have actually learned the language. So That's an interesting story. Today, we're not going to be talking about the Austronesian languages, unfortunately. We're going to stick with the Sinitic languages and talk about that because it's a big area of interest for everybody. So let's go on. My personal interests are in language acquisition, the evolution of language over time, also phonology and syntax, mainly in those 4 areas. So the languages that I've studied include languages from most of the branches of Indo-European, also some languages from Uralic, Altaic, Korean, Japanese, Sinitic languages, Austronesian languages, Kartvelian, a little bit of Arabic, and then got Thai, Kadai, and Afro-Asiatic languages. So I've kind of studied languages from a lot of different language families to get an idea for how language works. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about AI. Over the last couple of years, my team and I here at Glasgow, we've been looking at how artificial intelligence acquires language. And so we've been asking important questions like, if artificial intelligence were supposed to acquire human languages and at least be able to map between semantics and syntax, how would you build such a system? And so we're primarily interested here at Glossica is how we can use the algorithms that AI uses and machine learning uses to actually train humans. And so building an optimized sorting of all of that data for humans is one of our goals at Glossica. And so it's very interesting to note that if you were to, one of the bottlenecks that computers currently have is that if you give them a massive amount of training data, it's actually really difficult to prepare all of this training data for a computer. I believe that the human brain is massively more powerful in terms of parallel processing than a computer, and that we can actually acquire all of these skills that they're trying to teach computers at a much faster rate and much more efficient. So we're looking at how AI can actually help HI, which is human intelligence. So our whole goal is being able to increase human intelligence at the rate at which artificial intelligence is increasing. And so we've already developed several algorithms that we're starting to push out across all of our product line. But right now, you can actually already test this on our website with the Alphabet Games. So let me show you real quick. This is just an intro page to our Alphabet Games. But what the Alphabet Games do, what we're trying to do is, that if, for example, we can use these optimized algorithms to feed you this kind of a gaming experience to you to learn something like the Greek alphabet or the Russian alphabet, or something a little bit harder like Thai, Hindi, or Japanese, what happens is, if you're able to learn that alphabet and be able to read it after just an hour of play, think about what are the ramifications of that when we apply it to something very difficult like Chinese characters. Apparently, students are spending years and years just to acquire a reading knowledge of Chinese characters. But after we run all of our algorithms, we find that humans, with the optimized ordering, humans are actually able to acquire things at I would say, 3 times magnitude faster than what computers are able to do. So, and I think that we can improve the speed at which we do it. So when we apply this to learning something difficult like Chinese characters, I believe that we can take the time required to do it and bring it down to just a few weeks from several years. And so this is one of our goals here at Glossica, is to be able to do that. Let me show you a real quick example of the game samples. Here, mascoto, you can hear, what you do down below is you just type in the word you see here. Now, of course, this is level 17, so a lot of these letters have already been introduced at this point. So you start to input them, and you can actually play real quick. Just keep hitting enter with every single response. It goes real quick. And then here's level 29 of Korean, hogiada. So you just type in what you see there, and it kind of reinforces what you've already learned. And so this gaming experience actually increases your ability to read anything that you see written in a different script. So we've already released these. We've released one for the Bopomofo phonetic spelling for Chinese, and we're getting ready to release Chinese characters and Thai alphabet as well. So look forward to that. You can log on to Glossica and get a free account and start playing right away. The reason why you need an account is so that we can track your progress. And so it's really good feedback for us to be able to optimize that. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about our top-down approach. Our goal with the talk today is to introduce some of the languages in East Asia and Southeast Asia and some strategies for how you can acquire them. So you can kind of look at any of these languages and start jumping in and start using it right away. Okay, so in the West, we have, language families are quite clearly delineated. So here, as you can see, is the Indo-European language family, Uralic up north, Altaic down south, Afroasiatic here. So in this situation, it seems like, one area has one specific language family that speaks it in that specific area. And there's very little overlap. In the central part, going from Europe to Asia, you have from Turkey, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, over to Korea and Japan, you have this band of Altaic. Now, Altaic kind of, is made up of several different divergent groups, and even Korean and Japanese are not proven to be part of this, but you can see how that's also a delineated area. Okay, so the next slide, what you see here is kind of an overlapping of language families. So it's Austronesian kind of just, dominates that area right there, the one half of Taiwan, although now Taiwan is mostly Sinicized. Then you have the, a complex of language families right in here. And most of this is Sinitic. So we call this Sino-Tibetan. And Sino-Tibetan also includes Burmese. And so Burmese in this area here, there's a lot of smaller languages also in that language family. And so in your audience, you might have an individual who actually speaks one of these languages called Jingpo. His name is Andre Mueller. I don't know if he's in the audience today, but you can ask him about it. Okay, next one. Let's take a look at the Austronesian family. You can find all of these kind of charts on Wikipedia. They're very easy to look up. You can see that the spread of the language family has been really big all throughout the Pacific Ocean. We can compare vocabulary. So between Hawaiian, which is the most recently formed language, with Taiwan's oldest languages, we find a lot of vocabulary that's still the same. For example, in Shaishiat language, thank you is how do you say thank you? Ma'alo. And then in Hawaiian, it's mahalo. So you can see that there's quite a few, and Shaishiat is actually one of the oldest languages in Taiwan. So this date, we found evidence of people living there going back 5,000 to 6,000 years. So 3,000, I think, is a little bit. But you can see this arrow coming from mainland Chinese over to Taiwan. There is a theory called an Austric language family theory, which supposedly includes all of these language families. So if we look at the next slide, here we have Austroasiatic, and there are two main languages that we should recognize here, which is Khmer or Cambodian and Vietnamese. Now, what's interesting about this language family is that none of it is tonal. And I'll talk a little bit about word structure so that you can recognize whether a language is probably tonal or not. But what we do see is that some languages are becoming tonal. So there's something called tonal genesis. Languages are becoming tonal. So most of these languages are not tonal. Vietnamese acquired a tonal system. We believe it's borrowed from Chinese. But historically, it's not supposed to be a tonal language. Cambodian is not a tonal language either. But its consonant clusters are leading to tone in certain areas and in some cities. So there is some sort of a tonal, divergence starting to happen there. So we can also see this kind of change happening in other areas. Okay, let's look at the next one. Now, this is just a splatter of languages all over this southern China, northern Vietnam area here. And so you can see here languages that belong to the Miao language family, the Tai Kadai. So Tai Kadai includes Thai, and going all the way up into northern Thailand and southern Yunnan province. And then the Miao or Hmong languages here. Lots and lots of different things. And there's a lot of interaction and influence between these languages. So the language family becomes kind of really hard to define for linguists and the history of the languages and how they developed. But they do share a lot of things in common. So most of these languages are already tonal because their syllable structure has simplified, okay? So let's take a look now at Sinitic. Sinitic is derived from the Latin term for China. So Sina, This northern area here, number one, is all Mandarin. So Mandarin is now the national official language of China. And in Chinese, the Mandarin direct translation is guan. So in Chinese, they call it the universal language, or putong. Putong means universal, and hua is the common speech. So putong hua is the universal language. And now, in the last couple decades, linguists have found that this language here spoken in Shanxi province is actually a separate language called Jing. And then this language, how we differentiate it is because it has an extra tone and it has a glottal stop at the end of the word. So there's actually 5 tones versus Mandarin's 4 tones. Mandarin has glottal stops in certain areas, like in the Jianghuai region, and in other areas. So those dialects are actually really hard to understand if you learn Mandarin. A lot of the people in this area of China are almost impossible to understand if you learn standard Chinese. So even though they're speaking Mandarin, it really takes a lot of exposure to get used to how they speak. If you go really far west, a lot of Uyghur speakers, they actually only use 3 tones when they're speaking Mandarin. So yet it's another kind of a dialect. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, now this, I'm going to introduce each of these languages in turn, and I'll read the Chinese name for that language. And here you can see, wow, it's quite a complex situation, but there are some kind of delineated lines there. So Xiang is spoken in Hunan province. This one is very close to Mandarin. So there's an old version, a new version, and so it's getting, it's getting very, very similar to Mandarin there. So this one is kind of separate from all of the other languages. Wu, the second one, is spoken in Zhejiang and southern Jiangsu province over here. So this is famously known for Shanghainese. It's spoken in the northern Wu region, and then Wenzhounese is spoken in the southern Wu region. And so Wu is one of the only languages that has real voiced consonants, which also affects its tone structure as well. And then Hui is a smaller language spoken up in the foothills behind it. So we're not going to talk too much about that because there's not much known about that language. Gan is actually spoken in Jiangxi province right here in the middle. So Gan and Ke are actually part of a dialect continuum. So these 2 languages are kind of connected as a single group, but there are now 2 languages that you can identify. And Ke is the Chinese name for Hakka. So Hakka is a large language spoken in northern Guangdong province and part of Fujian province. Okay, so Min. This language is a group of languages. And if we look at Chinese historically, the language started to diverge about 2,000 years ago. And these Min languages, they actually started to appear as their own group. And all of the others started to diverge from a central Chinese around the Tang Dynasty, between then and about 1000 AD. So if you compare it to European languages, you see that most Slavic languages are about 1,000 years old. And so that's about how old all the rest of these other languages are. But the Min languages are quite different, and they're 2,000 years old. So the last 2, Yue and Ping, are spoken in the south here. So Yue is also commonly known as Cantonese. It's spoken in Guangdong province, and Pinghua is spoken just north of that here in Guangxi province. So if you ever visit the karst area of China and visit Guilin, the language spoken in Guilin should be Ping or Pinghua. So those 2 kind of belong together. They're very similar. Now let's take a look at the Min languages. So in the Min languages, you have Minbei, Mindong, Minzhong, Fuxian, Shaojiang, and Minnan, and Zhongwen. So the most important one is Southern Min, which is spoken right here. And it's basically split up into 2 large dialect areas. The southern area right here is in Guangdong province, in an area called Caoshan. And then these people, there's a lot of them living overseas, maybe in Europe or Australia, and they refer to themselves as Teochew. Now, for those of us who speak Minnan language, like here in Xiamen and also in Taiwan, we don't understand these speakers at all. So these are actually, very clearly different dialects. I think it would require a lot of time just listening and understanding, listening to them and having exposure to really pick up on it. Now, this language spoken here and in Taiwan are actually, they're not difficult to communicate with at all. Most of them are using very similar vocabulary. Sometimes the difference is only like British English and American English. Some words are slightly different. So all these other languages are impossible to understand if you speak only one of them. Fuzhou is in the north, and they speak Eastern Min, which is Mingdong. Okay, so it's good to understand that these languages have the biggest diversity. And so when it comes back to the Tai-Kadai languages and Austronesian, because these languages are so old, it's almost impossible to write them with Chinese characters. Like we don't know, how to write the word. Okay, I'll give you an example. For example, in Thai, the word for to drink is lim, and in Southern Min it's lim. So the sound is quite very similar. Whereas in Mandarin Chinese it's he. So he and lim, they're completely different. So and so there's kind of a Chinese character created in order to write that Taiwanese word or Southern Min word. Okay, so let's go on to the next part. I'm going to talk about what a Chinese dialect and topolect is and why there's a little bit of confusion between what Chinese people say and what Westerners say. So first of all, Chinese are topolects and they're not dialects. So first of all, let's look at the nomenclature. So here, the word for hua is just what everybody speaks. It's like the spoken language. And it is a more formal word for language. So I can call German 德语, and I can call Polish 波兰语, or 斯洛伐克语 for Slovak. Okay, so this is what we call 语言. It's also part of the word 语言. One actually refers to the writing. So if I say 德文, if I'm studying something like 德文, German, it probably refers to I'm actually studying it from a book, on paper, I'm getting ready to take a test. Okay, so this also is part of 文言文. 文言文 is kind of a very old traditional way of writing, and it's very different than from how people actually speak. The way that people actually speak is called 白话. So 白话 is kind of like Dante Alighieri writing in his Italian of the day, writing in his 白话 of the day. So that's what we call the living current language. Okay, so finally we come down to this word 方言. So 方 refers to location or a topographical location, hence topo. And yen refers to the language or lect. So a topolect really is the speech of a location. And in just a minute, I'm going to introduce a place to you. So what is the translation of dialect in English into Chinese? Well, dialect, and also the similar word in other European languages, it really has to do with the ability to communicate between one language and another. So when you say, oh, he speaks a dialect, it means that there's something similar and there's some things that are a little bit different. But in Chinese, 方言 has nothing to do with the similarity between two ways of speaking. In fact, 方言 could actually include many different languages all together. So, the next slide. We're going to talk next about the typology, the typological similarities between all of these Austric languages. Remember, Austric is kind of an umbrella term for the Austronesian and Austroasiatic, Tai-Kadai, and Sinitic languages. Okay, so first of all of these languages are analytic, which means there's no conjugation of verbs, there's no declension of nouns. What that means is that since nothing is marked in the sentence, you really have to pay attention to word order. And so when you're learning one of these languages, it's really, really important to focus on where's the verb in the sentence? How am I connecting everything to that verb? Where do things go in relation to the verb? And sometimes there's a verb that kind of goes to the end of the sentence, especially in Mandarin, in some of the Sinitic languages. Kind of similar to how German works a little bit, but not quite the same. So there's a lot of that happening, and the word order is very important, just like it is in German. So when we look at grammatical particles, the grammatical particles are also very important. It tells us the aspect of the verb and whether it was completed or not. And then the syntax. Syntax is grammar. The word order is very important, like I just said. So these languages tend not to have grammar in the sense that we think about it. Oh, how do I conjugate this verb? Or what is the past tense and future tense? That's not important. It's actually the word order. Word order and grouping of words together is how we describe the grammar. So let's take a look. I skipped over number 2 here because the phonotactics describes the syllable structure of the language. If we look at the CV structure, this is consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, that we see mostly in Austronesian languages. For example, the word for road in Thao is saran. we can find a cognate in Indonesian called jalan. So you can see that structure exists in a lot of words. And then that over time kind of starts to simplify and become a consonant cluster. Now this is what we see in Afro-Asiatic languages like Cambodian. There's like even the capital name of the country, Phnom Penh. You can see that there are these consonant clusters in that name there. So now the language is starting to lose data and words are starting to sound similar to each other. What happens is the language is going through a shift and a change where it needs to use tone to differentiate things. And you can see this happening in Europe as well. Some languages are starting to develop tone. And then we have this simplified syllable structure plus tone, like you see in Thai and many of those other languages, and also in Chinese. There are actually some languages that have dialects that share both of these. In fact, there's one language that writes its language like this, but speaks it like this, and that language is Tibetan. So if you learn Tibetan, there's lots of consonant clusters, but none of them are pronounced. However, there's a Western dialect of Tibetan called Ladakhi, spoken in India, where they do still speak it like this without tone. The rest of the Tibetan dialects require tone. So that's an interesting situation where Tibetan is, we can see a living language going through that change right now. Finally, CBN, this is at a nasal ending. So you get mostly common in Mandarin. And then you get Sanghi, where the tone is starting to get very complex arrangements with other words. And so this Sanghi starts to arise out of the patterns. And so it creates a very complex intonational pattern. So one of the most complex intonational patterns you'll find in Chinese right now is probably in the Wu languages like Shanghainese. And then also, since I mentioned before, there's analytic, so there is no fusional things like you have in English where you add an ending to the word and the sounds kind of fuse together, something palatalizes or something. You don't see that in Chinese so much, although we can see Chinese changing over time and becoming palatalized directly inside of the word through natural changes. But you'll find that there is one dialect, which is this Eastern Min of Fuzhou, spoken in Fuzhou, where they do have the fusional consonants happening on word boundaries. So this is a very interesting thing that's happening. We can see the language going through change, and it helps us understand how other languages work around the world. Okay, now I'm going to come back. I probably should have put this slide a little bit earlier, but that's okay. So Nanning Hua. Nanning is spoken in, Nanning is a city in Guangxi province. And this is kind of out on the western edge of where Cantonese is spoken. But Nanning Hua is a Nanning speech or Topdown. So there in that city, there are 3 languages spoken there: Mandarin, Ping, and Yue. Yue, also known as Cantonese. They're all spoken together in Nanning. So Nanning speakers use all 3 languages, and they interchange them with the different people that they speak with. So it's very interesting because they don't. If you say, oh, I want to learn how to speak Nanning Hua, it's not a very efficient way to think about it, because since these people, they live there and they're exposed to all 3 languages, that's how they speak. They mix all 3 together in their daily speech. Even though when they go to other areas, they can only use one with certain people because they don't have that exposure and they won't understand it. So that's an example, and there are many, many cities all over China where we say, you could even describe Beijing Hua. Beijing, there's so many different dialects spoken there, and people switch between these and those, and so it's really hard to kind of define what it is. So actually, Beijing Hua is a very old form of Mandarin. It's quite different than the standard Chinese. So that's actually a different kind of a dialect from standard Chinese. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Last year, I published a dictionary here called the 10-Language Dictionary of Chinese Characters. Now, what this dictionary has in it is a list of about 5,000 characters and their pronunciations in 10 different languages, including Cantonese, Hakka, and Shanghainese, Korean, Japanese, and Mandarin. And in the introduction, I discussed how the sound changes happen. So we can compare the syllable structure and how these sounds were borrowed into Korean and Japanese. So what happens to the ending in Chinese? It becomes an u ending in Japanese. So you get the word Dongjing, which becomes Tokyo in Japanese. And you can see that regular sound change. And sometimes they become an e ending, depending on the consonant in front. So the P endings, they all disappear in Japanese and become U's. So you can use these kinds of things to understand regular sound changes. And you can find the same things happening in European languages as well. Those regular sound changes. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at the Middle Chinese tone structure. Middle Chinese refers to the language 2,000 years ago. There's the Old Chinese language is at least 3,000 years ago, which is probably the language that Confucius spoke. So Confucius is not aware of any of the way the language is used today. It's quite different. So what we have is this tone table. And so I'm going to show you how we can use tones to jump between languages. But if we can put everything into a table, we're able to map what tone I should use in another language, because they're all graphed onto the same pattern. So we have the high tones and the low tones. One is yin and one is yang. And these are usually unvoiced. Okay, so it's very rare to find in Mandarin a word starting with ma, na, la in a first tone, unless it's onomatopoeia like mama. That might be in a first tone, but very few words are. So you're just not going to find those voiced consonants at the beginning of a word. All of the voiced consonants, and this unvoiced and voiced actually refers to the old language. So there's been a lot of changes since then, but mostly if I choose a character like yang, then this character actually belongs in a specific position on this chart. So it has a very specific tone pronunciation. So all 5,000 and all the 50,000 characters, they all have a specific position or pronunciation on this chart. Okay, so ping is actually in the bottom one down here, because that P was actually pronounced as a voiced sound in the old language. Okay, so let's go on. How do we pronounce the tone? So we can use tone contour numbers, which are different than Mandarin first, second, third, fourth tone, which is just a way to count them. What we want to know is how do we actually pronounce them? So we use these numbers. So 5-5 is ma. You can repeat after me, ma. And then a 3-5 is ma, ma. And then the third tone is 2-1-4. It has a dipping sound. Most people do not pronounce the up part, especially in speaking. So, but we isolate it. We can say ma, ma. And when you're speaking, just say ma, ma. Okay, and then the fourth tone, it starts very high and drops all the way down. So ma, 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 ah, like that, ma. Okay, so now let's go on and see. So I have, you can also get my book that I published called Mandarin Chinese Pronunciation Manual. It gives you about 4,000 Chinese words and 2-tone combinations, 3-tone combinations. You can practice all of those combinations and how they're pronounced. Okay, let's take a look at Mandarin tones and how they fit into this graph. We know that Mandarin only has 4 tones, but that graph has 8 positions. So where do the tones fit? Well, we number them like this: 1, 2, 3, and 4. What happened to these tones? In the ancient language, they all merged. We can just say they moved in with other. So the characters in this position, they all went up and moved into here. Some of them moved over here, and then these all moved up into here. So, for example, this word "sun" is normally pronounced in a 4th tone, but when we talk about, in linguistics, when we talk about the tone category, we say it in a 3rd tone: sang, sang. And so this "sun" actually moved over here, and it's now pronounced in the 4th tone in regular speech. So that's an example of that moving over. Now, these real tones over here, they all end in PTK. Mandarin has no words ending in PTK anymore, and it has no glottal stops. So this tone category completely disappeared in Mandarin. You can think of Mandarin as being kind of like French. They don't pronounce the T at the end of the word anymore, okay? But that affects the tone as well. So what happened to them? They moved over into other positions, and we're gonna practice that in a few minutes. We're gonna learn how to pronounce all of these. Okay, the Shanghai tones. Shanghai is Northern Wu. Okay, so let's go ahead and pronounce, there are 5 tones here. The first tone we always want to mark in the writing, and all the others we don't really need to mark, because all of these tones will start with a voiced consonant, and these won't. And then this one over here will always have a glottal stop ending. So when we write it in a romanized script, it's actually very easy to guess what tone it is. The other thing is these tones are rarely pronounced like this except in isolation. So we can go ahead and practice them. This is a falling tone, so repeat after me. Ma. This is ma, and all three of these are the same. So they've all merged together. We don't even know which one they merged with. They're just all pronounced the same. Okay, so this one is higher rising, ma, ma, ma. So compare with this one, ma, ma, ma. So if I say in English, did you put the book here? I'm using a high rising. That's not what I wanted to hear. That's not what I wanted to hear. You can hear that my word here is a low rising tone. Did you put the book here? So I'm using the two different tones here in regular English pronunciation. So here, 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 here. So you can hear the difference when I'm speaking English, but you may not hear it right away. Okay, over here, this is ma and ma, ma. Okay, next one. Taiwanese tones. Okay, Taiwanese also numbers their tones. So they count them like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But 6 disappeared because it's pronounced exactly the same as number 2. So in Taiwanese, when you're learning it, they'll never mark number 6, but you'll have 5, 7, and 8. Okay, so a word that is pronounced right here, a second tone in Mandarin is actually a 5th tone in Taiwanese. And they're both pronounced rising, so coincidence. The dipping tone of Mandarin is pronounced as a falling tone. So, for example, well, I'm not going to come up with examples right now. I'm going to spend too much time doing that. So let's go ahead and practice. Ma, 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 ma. Okay, so that's all of them. Let's go on to the next one. Hakka tones. So Hakka tones, also the middle section here kind of merged. It disappeared over time. So there might be something going on here with all of these languages. They're losing these tones. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and these two in the middle merged upwards. So we have ma, 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 ma. Okay, so here's a. So when I say the word Hakka, I'm actually saying k, but k ends with a K sound in the old language. And so that K is right here. And so I'm actually pronouncing it like this. And that H is unvoiced. So it's in the higher tone right here. So it's hak, hak. When I say ga, ga is a first tone in Mandarin. It's jia. So ke, jia in Mandarin. In Hakka, I pronounce it as hakka with a rising tone. That rising tone is first tone right here. So when I say hakka, I'm using first tone the same as I am in Mandarin. But the tone contour is different. So I'm saying ke, jia in Mandarin. Okay, so next one. Cantonese tones, right? So there's a lot of confusion about how many tones are in Cantonese. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. This one's split up into two different tones. And then we have, okay, so let's go ahead and pronounce them. Ma, 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 ma. So both of these are falling. They're easy to learn. Falling, and then both of these are rising. One's higher than the other. And both of these are flat. One's higher than the other. And these three, they're mimicking 3 other tones over here. So normally teachers, they won't mention the 7th and 8th and 9th tones because that's too much information for the student. But they really do exist. So normally, Cantonese teachers will just say there's only 6 tones. And actually, first tone has 2 different pronunciations as well. So you can say it has, 10 tones. Okay. Let's take a look at counting in Chinese. It just so happens that the Chinese numbers themselves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, they actually fall into each one of these boxes individually. So if we have the number for 0, ling, then we have 3, 9, 5, 4, 2, 1, 7, 8, 6, and 10. And they all happen to fall into their own category. And so we can practice counting in Chinese. So let's go to Mandarin. So the first one is Mandarin. Let's go ahead and count to 10 in Mandarin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, did I forget to say ling? I probably forgot to say it. Okay, next one. Shanghainese. Let's start with a ling. Ling. And then we have the Q at the end of the word just as a glottal stop. So that's ye. Let's see. Ni, se, si, lo, che. z. And so we double the letter to indicate that it's a voiced sound. And so we're using a modified pinyin spelling here. Okay, 2, 1, 2, 3, okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there's actually, Southern Min has two number systems. The one when you're just reading a number out loud, like a phone number, and another system for when you're just talking about how many things there are. So you'll see these alternate pronunciations. Okay, the next one is Hakka. So starting with 0, lang. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The next one is Cantonese. Lin. Ya. E. Sam. Some. So the umlaut here makes it a central vowel. So some, say, lo, tat, bat, gao, sa. Okay? And let's look at some vocabulary differences between the languages. So if we look here at the word for Mandarin, different, 不一样的. In Cantonese, it's 唔同嘅. Mandarin also has this word 同, but it's not used that much. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Mandarin compared with Southern Min. If we look at 一样的, 赶快, so it means the same. Mandarin is 一样的, and in Minnan it's spoken as 赶快. You can see there's quite a difference there. Okay, the next one in Hakka, 一样的 is pronounced 穷勇嘅. 穷勇嘅 is so you can see there's quite a difference in pronunciation there. Okay, the next one. Let's take a look at a sample Chinese sentence. Are you coming with me? When we speak Chinese, we have to think about what we're doing here. If we say come with me, we're leaving this spot and we're going somewhere else. So if we're going somewhere else, we're actually going, not coming. So when we speak Chinese, we want to change this coming into a go. So do you want to go with me? And normally Chinese will add the word together. So if we look at the Mandarin here, you want with me together go. Question. So 你要跟我一起走吗? So when we pronounce this, we have to put the words together into their prosodic parts, and so we will speak more fluently. So if we look at the Taiwanese, 这会赢不? So 你会大我这会赢不? And then in the Hakka, we can read the pronunciation here. 我同你共下來伊莫. And in Cantonese, 你要同我一齊走啊? So as you can see, there is some vocabulary that looks similar, but in all of these cases, the vocabulary differs, and you have to prosodic parts are. But as you can see, it's pretty easy to learn because there's no declensions, there's no conjugations, and you just mix and match your words wherever you want to put them. Okay, I was going to mention something about that, but I think I already explained it. Okay, so stay in touch with us. We're going to have a question and answer session. And also, I just want to remind you that we have job opportunities at Glossica under the careers page. You can also sign up for partnerships, and let's develop better technologies together. You can contact us at training@glossica.com. Right now, we're going to open the floor and accept some questions. So please send in your questions. How are we receiving questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have no time left for questions, so enjoy the coffee break. Thank you.